Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Film Seizure. I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Jason Oliver.
I'm Chuck Moore.
And you are tuning into yet another quarantine session as we continue to crank out some episodes while hanging out, preventing the spread of viral disease and what have you. But for this episode, we are going to talk about the 1991, I'm going to call it a masterpiece of John Singleton, Boyz in the Hood.
Indeed. Boyz in the Hood.
We're off to a flying start.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about why I think we chose to do this movie.
We're recording. This is pretty timely.
We're recording this episode only about a week removed from the largely peaceful protests that have erupted out of the most recent slaying of another black man at the hands of the police, George Floyd. And we thought we were trying to put together a slate for this month of August, correct, Jeff?
Yes.
And we thought this would be a good one to talk about, given the timely nature of the Black Lives Matter movement and what we're experiencing in this country and around the world now. People protesting, racial injustice, and I knew that this was a movie that Jeff likes quite a bit, and I do as well. I think this is one of the finest movies of the '90s, maybe one of the finest movies ever made, in my opinion. It would be probably in my top 50 of all-time movies probably ever made.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. Certainly,
and
I would
easily
say this
top
is top
10 of the 90s.
Exactly, that's exactly what I was going to say. Absolutely top 10 of the 90s, for sure.
And so it just seemed right. It seemed fitting. It's like if the podcast is going to do anything, in tribute of and in solidarity of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, I felt like, maybe this would be a good movie to discuss. Again, this is three middle-aged white men talking about the plight of, the black people in America, and it's not going to have a lot of perspective that is generally new to that experience. But I think it's important for men of our age and race to discuss these issues in the hopes that other people who look like us can grow in their viewpoints.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to echo a lot of that because this is something that, and we'll dive into it. When I saw this movie, this was something that really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. As much as a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, depending on when I saw it, as much as that could be, as much as those eyes could be open. But, and I do want to talk a lot about that experience because, obviously not a single one of us knows exactly what it would be like to be, at any point in our country's history, to be young black men, trying to make their way through a world that, let's face it, kind of largely don't really care about them. And there's a line that kind of exemplifies that later, which we can talk about when we get to it. But I can say, and we've kind of talked about this briefly in the past. I mean, we talked about 5 Easy Pieces, where you're dealing with a different time and a different group of people trying to figure out their own way through things as well. And we had talked a little bit about our, I think we have 3 different upbringings, and how that can shade some things and can kind of color in some ideas that we've had and throughout our lives and throughout our understanding of things and our acceptance of things.
Right.
So I'm sure that's going to come up and not a single one of us are going to have all the right answers. I hope that all three of us certainly have a lot of the right things to say and a lot of the right things to reflect upon with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's my kind of opening salvo, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on, if I can, the very beginning of this movie, because it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I remember watching it on HBO and having similar feelings to you, Jeff. Eye-opening, but also made me very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because I wasn't aware of what was going on in Compton or Crenshaw or wherever.
Right.
You know,
Hell, we
America,
barely know what's going on right down the street in downtown Indianapolis.
That's true.
I mean,
That's true.
So,
But John Singleton puts his message pretty front and center to start this movie. And I don't know what the stats are these days, but it starts by saying 1 out of every 21 black men will be murdered.
Yeah.
Most at the hands of another black man. So you have all this, while that's being stated, you hear shooting and all this madness in the background. So a whole lot of tension is created. But the first thing you see is a stop sign right after that message. So he's saying black men are killing black men, stop, right? And then you follow these children walk by, a one-way sign. Like this only sends you one way.
Yep.
And then the next sign you see is wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool to me the way that this movie opens. It's like, stop killing each other. This is a one-way street, and it's the wrong way to go.
Yep.
And that's even before we have any character introduction or anything, which to me was like super powerful. I was I was zoned in after I saw that.
Yeah, and then where it leads you, it's like you see the bullet holes on the wall through a re-election campaign poster of Ronald Reagan. And even to me, even today, I look at that and it's like, wow, that 10-year-old really has a negative, outlook on Reagan. And it's like, but then again, he knows better than I how that feels, and it's
Absolutely.
like, we obviously had different opinions of that president until we got a little older and realized, because we were too young to realize some things, but they're not too young to realize the impact that certain things have, and then being left with the knowledge of what they're going to see and what their ultimate place that they were walking to was to see a big puddle of blood. And for somebody, and it's chilling in a way to think that Trey, our main character, as a little kid, knows that what happens when plasma separates from the blood, what color is it turned? He shouldn't know that. I didn't know that when I was 10, and it's
or if you do know it, the reason you know that
is not the same. Right. It shouldn't be from school. It shouldn't be from...
Should be because you're interested in biology.
Right.
Right. But it does introduce Trey as a very smart individual who also is world weary at 10.
Yes.
A little bit.
And desensitized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because he's, as we follow Trey through the movie, he's not, there's only one time where you see him startled by something, and that's when his dad resorts to violence, or potential violence, I should say.
Right.
He is not, he's kind of fearless, but maybe not in the right ways of being fearless, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
I should mention that, along with you, Jeff, and Chuck, this movie was very eye-opening for me as well when I saw it. I saw this in junior high. I just started going to public junior high from a small Catholic school as elementary. Definitely had black students, black friends in elementary school, but there weren't very many. But then junior high was a lot more diverse, much more diverse, and that was a new experience for me. I started to really see the tensions
Hmm.
between black students and white teachers. I didn't quite understand it all at first, but things started to kind of creep in. There's definitely a disparity, in what I kind of could see as in incomes and opportunity, and just it seemed like the black kids are always the ones that were in detention or whatever, or were starting trouble, and I didn't always quite understand why until I started really talking to them and becoming their friends. My little league team was predominantly African American. I think I was one of maybe 3 or 4 white kids on the team, and that was the first time where I got to experience the sense of being the minority, right?
Yeah.
I had a black coach, so it was really, that experience changed me a lot, and that gave me, a much more in-depth understanding of just, these are just kids, man. They're just like me. They're my friends, but they go through a lot. They did not have the same opportunities I had, and a lot of them didn't have dads, and it was just like, it was a very, very eye-opening experience. And then seeing this movie and getting that, we get a better perspective. And this movie came out not long before the LA riots.
Yep.
With Rodney King. So all of this stuff was hitting me at the exact same time, like all this stuff. Culturally, I had this huge inflood of awareness around what was going on. I think I was, post, I didn't know that there was a thing, like racism was a thing until this moment in time. And it's really what set me on a journey of kind of understanding the person I wanted to be, and the way I wanted to treat people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what it meant, what prejudice meant, what racism meant. Those were not things that I wanted in my vocabulary, and that I still struggle with. I think every white person struggles with moments of prejudice in some way, shape, or form.
Right. I mean, the prejudice.
But recognizing that in myself and knowing that it's not who I want to be.
Yes.
And being able to reflect on the way you react to things is so important. And this movie, along with a lot of things in my life around that time, set me on that path.
I have a similar story from the other side. I played football in '91. I was one of the better players on our team, and our coaches were people that played in the early '80s. And there was this team from Kenmore, Amherst, Tonawanda, a predominantly black team that beat our team every year, beat our coach's team like 4 years in a row while they were on the team. And they were very interested in beating them, and they kind of riled us up into a us versus them kind of mentality. But then one of my coaches started saying some stuff that was just like, I can't agree. I don't agree with this. He's like, hit them hard and they'll never want to hit you. Like stuff he was directing directly at black kids. Like, mm-hmm. And I was very uncomfortable. And this was around the same time I would have seen this, around the same time as the riots, like you said. So I was like, man, my coach is a racist. We ended up beating the team, which is not unimportant in this story, but their reactions were just like, it was ridiculous. I felt really, is it skeevy? I don't even know the word. I just didn't like it.
It became an ugly sort of, we reasserted our dominance.
Yes,
yes. The white supremacy. Yeah.
I was happy that we won because that team was really good.
Yeah,
it was an accomplishment, but it was also really just.
It was a tarnished accomplishment.
And sportsmanship shouldn't end at that. Because you accomplish your goal, sportsmanship should extend beyond the victory. Yeah. It sounds like there wasn't much from your coaches in the way of sportsmanship there.
Yep, and I had liked them before, and I had a different kind of relationship with them going forward.
Yeah, well, it's a something like that. is interesting, Chuck, because it's one of those things where it begins with, I really want to beat that team. And then you start digging deeper and deeper into the common denominators, right?
Right.
And after a while, it's hard to, you get yourself lost in that when at the end of the day, the very bottom line, it just so happened that it was all a black team. And now you can't discern wanting to beat that team from, I want to beat that black team.
Right. And the fact that they were black didn't mean a thing to me.
No.
It was a football game that I wanted to win.
And they were really good, and you wanted to be the best.
Yeah, and our coaches put a bad slant on it. One particular coach, I don't want to call all of them out, but
yeah.
Well, sure. So a little bit of my background, it's like my first schools were in Greenwood, Indiana, and there was no black kids in Greenwood at that time. At least not that I can remember. I think when my brothers graduated from Greenwood High School around the same time, I think there was 1 or 2 black kids in high school at that point. A very, very different era. I mean, this was before, hell, I went all the way through more than half of the 90s before you started really realizing that the suburbs around Indianapolis could potentially have black families in it. And they were still mostly centralized in further north than, say, Thompson Road or so. But certainly more Troy, maybe, if we were looking at the south side. When I moved to the south side of Indianapolis, and then being in public school, then I did get to see, I'd say probably about 25% of the student body was black because they were bussed in. And in elementary school, they were just the other kid. Just another kid. A lot of us had the same things that we were into. It's like we like comic books and Nintendo and Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that's what we did at recess. It was just
right.
It was just the other kid. Middle school was the same, where mostly the same people going to the same schools. High school was when I really started to realize that something was different, and this came out in the summer in between my 8th and 9th grade. I don't think I saw this movie until probably early '92, because it wasn't playing on the South Side. It just wouldn't.
Right.
Let's put it this way: the demographic wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this before, Jason, on the show. I think growing up, it's like my family wasn't racist or anything like that, but I watched what they watched, and for the most part what we watched were movies that were predominantly white.
Right.
That's just what I'm watching the Star Wars movies, and Lando was there, but
the fact of the matter is, there wasn't much produced that wasn't predominantly white.
That's true.
Right, at least in the mainstream. And and it's like, it's kind of funny because it's like getting a little older. It's like I think I finally realized, it's like, I think I rented Shaft one time when I was a teenager or something. It's like, hey Mom, have you ever seen this? She's like, yeah, I like that movie. It's like, I didn't know she ever saw that movie, but there was no reason for me to know that before, but anyway. So
Can
it's
I
not
know?
like,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want to note one more thing, and maybe I haven't looked up this historically, but I distinctly remember in my high school is when black culture started to come into play with white kids.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Kids were listening to NWA. They were
late 80s. Yeah, absolutely.
We had some really negative words for the white people who accepted black culture, who acted like that.
Yep.
So I won't use them.
Yep.
But it was very predominant. There were like 4 black kids in my school, I think, but there were hundreds of white kids who had delved well into the culture.
At least
Even I
related
listen to
culture.
NWA, and
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So the culture was pervading is pervading a bad word? I don't know what word to
No,
use here, but it was.
in context, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, it just started to show itself a lot. We were seeing a lot more black culture in our town that wasn't predominantly black in any way, shape, or form. So this movie was important, I think, in the ushering part of our understanding as white
or at
kids.
least a fuller world understanding of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because let's face it, for our
do
generation,
think that a lot of white kids missed the point.
They did.
Yeah.
They did.
Like
They
a
100%
lot
did.
of them did, and they wanted to they were
It's
latching on to the glorification of what they perceived
They wanted
was
to be
was
hard.
cool. They wanted to be hard, yeah. Which obviously, Boys on the Hood is the exact opposite of that message. But there were a lot of movies produced that could be taken much more easily out of context in this era.
Even this movie, you could, if you weren't paying attention to the message, you can get a lot of glorification out of it.
Mhm.
Yes,
Like if you were,
and I do have something to say about that later.
Yeah.
So and and it's like I realized something was a little bit different once I got into high school, because that's when the realization was hitting that the way that they were busing people in was taking people out of their neighborhoods and bringing them to a predominantly white neighborhood and predominantly middle or upper middle class, area of town. And, I grew up lower middle class, I think it's probably fair to say. Divorced parents, and I could identify with them in a lot of ways with the single parent element of it. Now, I had two luxuries. One, my dad was always around. My other luxury is I always had the ability to rise out of that easier by accident of my race.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like I also understand their class struggle very much, because when you don't have a great deal of money, you don't always think long term as well. I'm not thinking about spending 4 to 6 years in college. I'm thinking about I got to work right now,
Right.
Or whatever. And some of that places you in a different mindset, and it doesn't help you with school. Then add that layer of you're bringing somebody away from their comfortable surroundings, and they have to wake up way earlier than I had to go right down the street. They're tired. They can't focus as easy, and it's like I can see that as a 14-year-old. It's man, don't rip on this kid who's nodding off during class because he had to wake up at fucking 5 a.m. to get here or whatever.
Not only that, but who the fuck knows what's going on in his house and what he's got to contend with when he is home, right? And then he's got to come to a school where they basically speak a different language than him, right?
Different expectations too.
Totally different expectations. It's just, one way it's an opportunity, but another way it's like just setting up these kids to fail in another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, I think we all go through dumb periods of our lives. But I can say just from my own perspective that, I can honestly say I was never, I never did anything in my life that had any kind of racial reasoning behind, or anything of that matter, except to try to understand and just, hey man, you don't have an enemy in me,
Right.
That's the only thing I can say that had racial underlying intent, I guess, behind that. So yeah, I mean, like, seeing this movie and understanding that this isn't black people just being black people. There's more to it than that. These are people who are being basically stuck in a place where they're not going to be able to easily escape from with social standing. There is family dynamic. There's all of this other stuff that could very easily be told in a period piece, 150 years earlier in a bad part of London or a bad part of New York or, with white people. And realizing that when I watched this movie, I was like, well, shit, they're no different than, like, some of these people are no different than some white people that I knew in the apartment complex that I lived in. They're struggling with a stressed out single mom or not much money or whatever, and they can't, but it's just there's other pressure on time. And what I realized later is that there's all that other layer of social stuff and institutional stuff that's kind of putting the thumb on the scale a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's good to find ways to relate to that struggle, but it's also important to keep the perspective of, but you're still white, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more than ever, when I think about some of my later life achievements over the last few years, and I think about some of the neighbors that I have, and it's like some of them are no more or less smart as I am, or in some cases probably even smarter than I am, and I've got an advantage on them.
Yeah,
it's
really difficult to talk about these things without sounding patronizing, I think.
Sure.
I feel like most of what I'm saying is coming off that way in some way. But I think it's important, again, to stress the fact that what we're trying to say, or at least what I'm trying to say, is to speak to other people. That's ultimately all I want to come out, because I don't feel like I'm perfect. I'm far from fucking perfect. But I feel like white people can do better in general, obviously. It's the fucking most obvious statement in the world.
We have to do better.
And the only way we can is if we talk about this stuff that makes us uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah.
We're gonna come off sounding pretty stupid sometimes, I think, just from the standpoint of, they're trying to relate to my struggles, but there's just no fucking way I can do that.
Absolutely.
But I have to find some way of building that empathy, and that's
right.
the most important thing.
Exactly right. Like, that's what I was saying. It's like when I saw this movie, the first thing that I could really kind of glom onto is that, well, damn, these are just unfortunate people. Doesn't matter what color they are. They're right. Unfortunate people in unfortunate situations.
Yeah, they live in like no one would choose to live where they live. I mean,
no, they live there because they have to.
And it's impossible, and it's really hard to escape it. And that's So that's really kind of the first message, right? Is that it's great. John Singleton, they should stop the violence, right? Increase the peace was supposed to be the tagline for this movie. But the studios didn't want that. Columbia didn't want that.
It shows up at the very end.
Very end. But all the crew hats said increase the peace. But and it makes the mention of the black on black crime, which I think has that sort of positioning has changed over the decades. Because while statistically, yes, more black men kill black men than white people kill white people, it's not actually all that much difference. It's like a 7% difference. But the point then is that, it's the Furious Styles soliloquy when he talks about gentrification, and when he talks about how society is driving this black on black crime.
Yep.
And all of the factors that go into the reason why they're in the situation that they're in.
And they're all falling into the trap.
Right. Yeah.
And some of them are falling into the trap because they have no choice but it's like...
Well, they don't even see the trap.
Well,
they don't even realize it's a trap.
It's survival.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in some cases, I mean, some of those people who don't see the trap, but then there's some people who can't avoid the trap because it doesn't matter.
Right.
The trap is at the bottom of a really steep hill, and the hill is glazed with butter. Yeah. You're gonna fall, right. And that's the thing. And
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's like, I think the thing is that you find whatever that common footing is, mm-hmm. and you understand that common footing, and then from there you can then build upon that empathy, like you were saying. It's like, the common empathy for me was seeing that these are just people in unfortunate situations, and then later learning more and more and more as I grew up and matured, understanding how the world works, and then seeing, oh, this is how the world works, huh?
Yeah.
Speaking of understanding how the world works, Jason, you had mentioned outside of this chat that John Singleton was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is something you wanted to bring up on your own, but I'm curious, I think he's from south of Los Angeles. Was he a product of projects?
This is his story.
Okay.
This is his story. It's very autobiographical. He grew up in South Central. He had a very strong father figure in his life. I mean, Furious Styles is based on his father. He had to go live with his father after he got into some trouble at school because his mom didn't want to deal with it anymore. So he had that, he moved from one neighborhood to the other. But yeah, he lived with his dad in South Central growing up. He shot in his neighborhoods essentially. He was intimately familiar with all of those locations. But he, he was by and large pretty lucky. He had a strong father figure who taught him, and was really, disciplined about, who he hung out with, what he did, and ingrained a lot of the same things that Furious Styles ingrained in Trey, right, in the movie. The 3 tenets of being a leader, all that kind of stuff is directly from his father. And he was also very intelligent, smart guy, super smart, got into USC on the strength of, I think, an early draft of Boyz n the Hood. Was able to develop that script while he was at USC, sold it by the time he graduated, and was making his debut feature like 1 year out of USC. That's
amazing.
Just phenomenal story. I mean, his story is this without the USC. It's what the making of this movie is what happens next for Trey Styles, basically.
Right.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. He made lots of movies. He followed this up with Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson, I believe, isn't that right?
Yep.
And then Higher Learning, which he drew a lot from his USC days, was sort of the follow-up, if you will, to the autobiographical nature of Boyz n the Hood, and how he navigated university with the predominantly white classmates and all of that.
This was the exact same street that Friday was filmed on too, right?
I'm not sure.
Pretty close, at least, I would think.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I had
one
no
interesting
idea.
thing about I wanted to watch the commentary because I wasn't sure how much he would get into the socio-political aspects of Boyz n the Hood and its impact. What I found interesting and almost refreshing, actually very refreshing, was that all John Singleton really wanted to talk about, I mean, he talked a lot about the autobiographical nature of the story, but he wanted to talk about the filmmaking aspect of it and how it was a debut feature. He was very adamant that he wanted an all-black crew, and he did. He had an all-black crew on this. There's only one white character in this whole movie, too. Yeah, and the only white crew member was the producer. The producer from Columbia is the only Steve Nicolaitis. He's the only white person involved with this movie. He was very adamant about that. Keep it black, basically, right? The Fury Styles speech again, but he was also very aware of the fact that he can't fail. This
Right.
cannot. There's so much weight on me to make it the best movie possible. And he did a lot of preparation. He looked at first time directors and how they shot films, and he was like, I don't want to do any crazy stuff, moving the camera in all these different ways. I don't want people. A lot of first time directors make that mistake. They think they have to make their mark, right? He's like, no, he looked at the films of Scorsese and Spielberg, and he was like, I can do very simple master shot, cut to action master shot, right? Like very, very filmmaking 101 type stuff, and he mentions this several times. Every time there's that sort of convention in the movie, in the commentary, he points it out. He's like, see, that's all I'm doing here is this, then this, then this. As flashy
Which also
as he gets,
it plays really, really well also that this is a drama anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Which that does you don't have to get flashy with a drama.
His commentary is one of the most informative commentaries I've listened to on just filmmaking, and I was amazed. I was not expecting that. I don't know why, but I wasn't. I was expecting the impact culturally of this. It was an anniversary edition commentary, but no, he wanted to talk about his craft, and I thought that was so fucking cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of to kind of roll off of that and what I was saying, this being a drama, this is a really, really simple story. And I think the reason why it succeeds so well with it being able to reach people and help them understand what life is like for these people is to say, hey, like I was saying, it's like you watch this movie and you can apply this situation to people and situations that you can see, that Well, that's makes this very, very easy to fall into, right? Because this is these are essentially the stories of three kids from two families. And the juxtaposition of having a dominating parent figure versus not, and how that can affect you, and how it can lead you down some wrong paths without actually purposely leading you down the wrong path, or leading you down the right path purposely.
Yeah, 'cause you have Furious Styles, who is a very strong figure, as we pointed out. But Doughboy and Ricky's mom is a very emotional person.
Right, and she favors one over the other.
Right.
Yeah,
Ricky is the good son, and Doughboy is the bad son. But she's very emotional in all her actions. It doesn't seem like she's not putting them in a direction. She's reactive instead of proactive. And that her reactive nature affects Doughboy in a very strong way.
Right. For Ricky, well, he's getting he's getting the benefits of being smiled upon.
Right, because he's talented. He's a way out. Right, which gets talked a lot in black films or whatever, is like finding the way out of this thing. So we talked about the fact that Trey has an issue in the very beginning, which gets him sent to his father, and we see him with Doughboy and is it Dookie? Is that the other? I can't remember. Or is it Chris? Chris. Yeah, Chris. Furious Styles offers them money, $5 to do the raking, right?
Yeah.
one
And
of
they're
my
like,
favorite lines of the movie though is in this sequence.
I know what it is.
Go ahead.
Hold on, I gotta get it right. I don't want to.
No,
I know you already know what it is, but it's
because it's what you guys say about me.
Because it's what I say about Jeff. Yep. Susan was like, "Oh yeah, that guy is Jeff." So this fool got more comic books than a motherfucker.
Yep.
that little kid or big kid, I should say, who plays young Doughboy. Oh my God, he's the best. He's the best.
Yeah, Baja Jackson.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they allude to the fact that, we don't need to rake yards for $5. We can make money in other ways.
And so he's like, fine, whatever. You, son, you're going to do the right
now
thing.
you have to do it for free.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And, and it's, that very night, he's saying, hey, I need you to go and clean the tub or something like that or whatever. And he's like, well, what do you do? And that's his first life lesson. It's like, I've got to put the food on the table. I got to pay the bills. I got to, it's like.
And it's the way he has to say it. He says, all I have to do is.
Yeah. Which is, all I got to do is give you.
Is everything else, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, right.
On your back. Yeah.
Yep. So, it's, and I think it's that very first night when somebody comes in and tries to rob the place, and Furious pulls out a .357 Magnum, blows gigantic holes in his front door. Notice that nobody else ever broke into their house again.
Right. But this next scene is very interesting to me, too, where the cops show up, and, of course, you have the hour wait, which, is like, yep, that makes sense. They have to wait forever. But the foil in this scene is a black cop.
Yeah, he shows up again.
So it's John Singleton reinforcing the message of we should be sticking together, not having these types of issues.
Right, and the white cop in this movie
is oddly a bystander.
He's a bystander, and he feels the awkwardness of these moments that happen.
But it illustrates something that us as white people need to do. We need to
stop being bystanders.
We need to stop being bystanders. We need to step in these situations where we might feel uncomfortable to do so. And obviously this other cop, and I don't know if this is Singleton's intention here, but if it's not, it comes across that way. Sure.
I think a lot of the intention, now this was what I was reading into, and I could be wrong, but I think some of the intention was that, yes, that white cop is the guy you expect to fear, but it's when you institutionalize the black man that only furthers the bad stuff.
That's exactly it. In the later scene where that same cop puts the gun in Cuba Gooding Jr.'s neck, in the commentary, Singleton he talks about that character with nothing but pity. And it's he's like this guy found his way out, if you will, but he
found his way out into chains.
Right.
Would be the way I would put it.
And he's still wrestling with a lot of issues. Yeah.
Right, and he can't show favoritism because then he might lose his job due to the white institution.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the pressure that he's under, absolutely is immense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and but like at the end of that scene, like when you see him come back, and because at first, in the first scene 7 years earlier, he's like, "Hey, little man, how's it going?" And that's one of my favorite scenes where the guy asks Furious, Lawrence Fishburne, Lawrence Fishburne's just fucking great and everything. But he asks Lawrence Fishburne, he's like, "Hey, something wrong?" And Fishburne's like, "Yeah, something's wrong. Too bad you don't know what it is, brother."
Right. Yep.
And then later he doesn't know that Cuba, because I would not be terribly surprised if the subtext there is that even the black cop thinks everybody looks the same in this neighborhood. So he doesn't know that that's the little kid that he was friendly to 7 years previous, sort of friendly to 7 years previous. But at the end of that scene, after he basically threatens to blow Cuba Gooding Jr.'s head off for I don't know what. I mean, like not answering his questions satisfactorily, not loud enough, not
Had
whatever.
an attitude. He had an
attitude.
even though he really didn't.
No, he really didn't. But the white cop is just kind of like, he just says to Ricky, it's like, hey man, just go home, stay out of trouble.
Try not to get in any trouble.
Yeah, and it's like, it's, again, every convention tells you the white cop should be the bad guy in this situation. That's not the nightmare of this situation. The nightmare of the situation is to have the black cop be, the aggressor.
And I think it's probably in some way John Singleton is also trying to not make a movie about racial tensions per se.
He's not making colors.
Right. He's trying to tell a story about essentially the plight that his people are in, right? And there's definitely things that have contributed to that, but he's really not interested in stoking any sort of racial tension. He's just kind of pointing out, hey, this is the way things are, and this is another thing. This is another symptom of that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think since his message is strongly blacks need to stop killing other black people, if they introduce a white villain, it takes away from that
takes away from the message. Yeah, and if here's the thing where you have people like, you have the gang members in South Central or Doughboy or whoever is able to get a gun. Well, that black cop is issued a gun. Right. And he has a badge to hide behind. So he's no better than anybody who's still in the neighborhood, and he's probably coming from a better neighborhood, no less.
Right.
It's like when we drive by if we drive by like a trailer park or something, and we just rip on poor white trash.
Right.
It's like because we come from someplace outside anyway. Right.
Yeah.
So there's another layer there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So back to 1984, the next day. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, I think.
The next day after the shooting?
Yeah, back in 1980. Yeah, when Furious shot through the door.
I went up to use the restroom. Did you guys mention what Furious said to Trey when Trey said, "I wish you blew that motherfucker's head off"?
No, we didn't.
Oh, no, we didn't say that.
I quite liked it. He basically said, "Don't say that. Don't say that. That would just be contributing to the killing of another brother."
Yep. Right.
Again,
more reinforcing. Yep.
That message. Just like, look, I'm going to do what I have to do to defend my home, defend my son, defend myself. But I don't wish that I killed that man.
Right.
Yeah.
Important.
Right. Which is something that Doughboy doesn't have.
Right.
He is, he kind of flies in the face of that.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and here we go.
But that's a moment like that you think probably contributes to Trey's good decision later. Right?
Yes.
Right.
If he didn't have those words spoken to him and his father always in his ear about things, he probably would have made the wrong choice later.
Yeah, because he's obviously thinking about his dad during that whole car ride later.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just like his dad's thinking about him.
Yeah.
So I mean,
powerful.
really, what we have here is you have three characters in Trey, Doughboy, and Ricky who kind of represent that id, superego, and ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where Doughboy just reacts. He's just reactionary. Everything is. Like as Regina King says later, it's like, why do you always have to call women a bitch or a hoe or whatever? He's like, shut up, bitch, or whatever. It's like, he's just reactionary. He's all the time. And, Trey is the superego where he's always stopping himself from doing something. He never goes all the way, which is good in a lot of situations. And then of course, Ricky is just thinking, well, what is best for me?
Right.
What is the best way out for me?
But he's not the smartest kid either, so.
No.
But it's interesting that next day, and I think they exemplify this theme you were just talking about. They take the football, and they're walking to see their buddy Chris. And Doughboy keeps saying, you shouldn't have brought that football. You shouldn't have brought that football. I'm like, why shouldn't he have brought the ball? That's
right.
In my mind, like, what's wrong with this? But they get on the train tracks, and I mentioned this the other day. Chris says, y'all want to see a dead body. Yeah. An obvious reference to Stand By Me, which is great.
And the end has one, too.
Yep. Yes, a very strong one at the end. But they go to see the dead body, and none of them are ultra surprised, again, by this.
They're more surprised by the smell.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, again, Trey says that's what they start to smell like after, or maybe Chris says that. Someone says that.
One of them, yeah.
Well, and that's a very, I think John Singleton, what he's doing there, and this is obvious probably, but there's a whole movie built around the coming of age in Stand By Me by a bunch of white kids, right? That revolves around them traveling several miles to go see a dead body that they heard about that's in the woods, and their confrontation with other bullies and all of this and that. They go through a lot. And yeah, some of those kids don't have a great life in that movie, but it's like the journey for these 3 black kids was a 10-minute walk. It was in their neighborhood.
Yep.
Right? And guess what? That's just a small part of this story.
They could have walked the other way for 10 minutes and saw another dead body too, probably.
Possibly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes,
exactly.
I'm with you. That's a good point there for sure. And they do even drive that point home further with the fact that there are bullies there.
Yeah. Yep. Right.
Yep. Who take the ball, and I'm like, oh, okay, now this makes sense. They're, But the kid that when he pulls the money out of his pocket, he's like, I could buy 100 balls or whatever, but he still takes it.
Yeah.
And Doughboy goes into his id reaction there, where he's like, I'm gonna get this fucking ball back.
Yep. Yeah, you don't fuck with my brother.
And he confronts the other kid who's a hard ass, but you have the biggest, strongest dude there is kind of a softie. Yeah. He's being tough for his friends, but he also is like, we shouldn't take their ball.
Yeah, and I will be tough towards you if you, say, tell me to fuck off. Yeah, and that is that supposed to be the same gang that comes back later?
I tried to figure that out, but I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
I think they're analogs, if at best.
I would say so.
They would be a lot older, but
yeah. And to be honest with you, probably those guys are dead. To be honest, right. 90.
I like John Singleton in the commentary around that scene with the guy who throws the ball back to Morris Chestnut. Ricky, thank you.
Yeah.
He said, he was like, he wanted that scene to obviously, contribute in some positive way to breaking the cycle, but also like that guy probably had dreams and aspirations when he was Ricky's age. He maybe wanted to play ball, right?
Right.
And he sees that in Ricky, and he's like, I can't further break this.
And he looked like a football player. He was a
big
exactly,
he was a
exactly.
big dude.
That was intentional. Yeah.
Well, and oh god, it kills me. He throws the ball back, and Ricky doesn't catch it.
Every time it kills me.
Yeah, and Doughboy's like, man, you're weak.
Sorry. He calls him
you're sorry. That's what he's saying.
Yep.
That's so funny. But then we find, do we go directly to 90? Well, no, they go home because Trey has to go fishing with his father.
Trey's got to go fishing, and they go fishing, and Doughboy and Chris are going to go to the store. To which Ricky's like, man, Mom didn't give us any money. He's like, I'm going to the store anyway. I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, so Trey goes on the fishing trip with his father where he learns, or he repeats the 3 leadership tenets back to his father.
Yep.
They have the awkward talk about sex.
Yeah, it's so great.
It's kind of funny. Yeah.
It's so great.
What I find kind of interesting about that is that, now granted, having at the time that I would have been 10, like Trey and the other characters in 1984, at the time that I was 10, my brothers were in their early to mid-20s. So my education of it comes differently. And my education of sex is also something that was taught in school, and so there was a lot of stuff that was different. But like the fact that I don't think that conversation always happens when somebody's 10, but maybe it has to.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a clear like point being made there. Like at 10 years old, there's no way my dad would have talked to me about that. Zero. But kids, in that community would probably be having kids at 12 and 13.
Well, but
Not
at
probably,
least within
they were.
5 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
at least within 5 years, most kids were
Well,
probably.
you see the dividends of that conversation later when Trey's older. When Trey's trying to tell his dad, this basically made up story about
Oh
him
my God!
losing his
It's like
virginity.
it's so obviously made up too.
It's
You're right,
hilarious.
because his dad is kind of a ladies' man, and he sees that, and
Oh
he
my
thinks,
God! Doughboy's mom wants that.
yeah,
Lawrence
and
Fishburne.
Trey wants to relate to his dad on that level, because
Yeah. Well, he looks up
Furious
to him.
tells him, I'm only 17 years older than you are. They're
Yeah.
and then Furious reiterates the conversation about you better be having protection, and him saying, well, she said she was on the pill, and how angry he gets about that, right? And then you find out later he was just telling a story, and that he's been too afraid to have sex because he doesn't want to have a baby. And it's like, Furious is doing his goddamn job. Good job,
Yep.
Furious.
Yep, he
Right?
also has another brick wall in his girlfriend.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have at the end of that scene after fishing, he goes home, and Doughboy and Chris are getting arrested.
Yeah.
Right.
this is-
Which now I made a note about this because it's like, everybody, we all know kids. It's like, oh, they went to juvie,
Right.
or whatever, right? They were never, not in my experience, they were never hauled off in handcuffs by police.
Jesus, Jeff. I got caught shoplifting, and that never happened to me. Like stealing baseball cards or something.
Sure.
But they're like slap on the wrist, send you home.
Yeah.
Or half the time you wouldn't even call
the worst
cops
thing is
on
to
you.
call your. Well, the worst possible thing for us would have been, you want us to call your mom? Fuck no, I don't.
Right.
It's like, here's the 50 cents for those baseball cards, or whatever. That's how that would have ended for me. But I would have, But in this neighborhood, they're being made an example of.
Uh-huh.
That does not help the psyche of
Nope.
of this area.
No, and this takes the story kind of takes an interesting twist here. For me not remembering it, I figured Trey and Doughboy would be best friends the whole movie. But what really happens is Ricky and Trey become best friends. And we basically shoot 7 years ahead to 1991.
One
Is
real
there
quick
something-
thing before we leave 1984. I cannot listen to the song Ooh Child and not think of that scene where Lawrence Fishburne's talking about it in the car.
Yeah.
I love that he's humming it. I was like, does he not know the words? Does he just like the melody? But I love that song, and it's great in that scene too. It's perfect.
Yep.
There's one interesting thing. I don't want to lose sight of Singleton's craft and how much he discusses it. There's a lot of interesting things he does with sound in this movie, and he mentions it a lot. Like, Singleton is very proud of the sound design of this movie, because, as he says, he had to take sound twice. The first time he took it at USC, he got a D, because it was taught by the creator of THX, and it was very physics based, right?
Oh my God.
And it was just not like practical, and he wasn't getting it. He wasn't grasping it. It was like, so he ended up getting a D and had to take it again. But then by taking it again, he was able to absorb a lot more about how to use sound in film. So there's a lot of moments in the movie where a character will just do something or react to something that isn't intentional, that then he placed sound under, right?
Oh,
so like there's a lot of scenes where Ricky and Trey are driving, in the Bug, and Ricky's talking, and he might turn to the right, look out the window or something. He'll put like a car alarm there, right?
Oh yeah, that's
so
cool.
stuff that he's like, sort of retroactively reacting to. So I just thought that was really cool. And he also mentioned the fact that, the helicopters and the police sirens and all of that, the spotlights, like, it's everywhere in that movie. It gets to the point where it's so ubiquitous that even you as the audience member kind of starts to forget it's there. And he said that was very, very intentional. Yeah.
The only time that I ever noticed the helicopters and once the movie was like kind of rolling along, was during the sex scene with Neil Long.
100%.
Because it's like, that was where it's like, the fuck do they want to, shine a light on this for? It almost ruins that moment.
I think that's absolutely intentional too.
It absolutely was. In fact, Singleton mentions that that's maybe the only moment where that helicopter spotlight might have made the moment more romantic. How interesting is that?
Yeah, maybe. It's something that shows up where it's like I have like this conflicting opinion of, where it's like, hey, even with all of this shit, this happens, and then also
But it's
I feel
everywhere
like,
in the movie. It's all throughout the movie. It's amazing. Like the scene where Ricky's talking to the college recruiter. It's all throughout that scene.
Yep.
He puts on the tape almost to drown it out. Right.
Even the recruiter, who's a black guy, seems mystified by it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
He is. Yeah, and it's like the black recruiter handles Ice Cube and his buddies on the porch better than he handles the police presence, the helicopters and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The only thing that really truly shakes him is the baby.
Yep.
Is that your little brother? No, actually, it's my son. And he's like, okay,
we look
we'll
forward to
talk to you
talking
later. Yeah.
I wonder about that too. Like, I don't want to get too far ahead in the story, but if Ricky achieves his goals, if USC would have actually accepted him, if that recruiter would have made the recommendation to accept him, ultimately it doesn't matter.
There is a affirming and heartbreaking moment in that, even beyond just the baby. It's when Ricky asks if he really thinks he could get into college. And the recruiter says, young brother, I think you can do anything you put your mind to, right? And it's such a cliche thing to say.
But it's exactly what somebody like him needs to hear.
And if you look at his reaction, you can tell it's the first time anybody's ever told him that. It's the first time he's ever heard those words. And he takes to it and he accepts it. And he thinks, you're fucking right, I can. It's beautiful, and it's hard.
And at that point,
at the same time.
I feel like if he didn't hear that, he would have sloughed off the SAT.
Yeah,
maybe.
Very, very possibly.
Yeah, and he's having a hard time during the SAT, and I was like, at that point, I was like, yeah, absolutely, brother. I had a hard time too with the SAT.
Right.
That's just not my thing. It's like, but like, I wanted to be any place else that Saturday that I took the SAT, and I probably scored appropriately. So,
but I'm sorry, I jumped us forward. So let's go back. We've got the time jump to 1991.
1991.
The barbecue, the backyard barbecue for Doughboy getting out of prison.
God damn, I wanted some of that fucking barbecue.
It looked good, didn't it?
I know you didn't bring me no swine, right?
Yeah. But this is a great setup scene. Like, it's fun, but it tells you what happened over the last 7 years in a very quick and edible way.
Yep, he's been in and out of trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, Doughboy's been in and out of trouble. Chris has gotten shot at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You have to assume, so he's in a wheelchair.
He's in a wheelchair.
Ricky is obviously an athlete. He's
father.
And a father. Trey comes in. Cuba Gooding Jr. is he's so Cuba in this scene.
Yes.
He's so weirdly awkward but believable.
Right,
like,
it's perfect because he does kind of, like, maybe not outwardly, but he does kind of think he's better than them.
I don't think he thinks that. I think he feels like he doesn't fit in.
Well,
but you might be right. He
certainly has a slightly different and a much better guiding hand than most of these characters.
He is trying to better himself. He has a job. He isn't involved in, whatever the gangbanging or whatever word you want to use there for that.
Yep.
He seems like a pretty well-centered individual, and Ricky does in a lot of ways.
He's got a job too
in the scene. Yeah. He works at the mall.
Yep.
That's where he got his shirt.
That's right. Yep. Boy, that was some early 90s.
That's like some Zeke Havarici shit.
So I've heard this story a couple of times now, and I have to put it here. That was the shirt that Cuba Gooding Jr. wore to his audition for that role.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and John Singleton was like, "You got the part, and you need to wear that shirt in this particular scene." Your adult character is introduced. He's like, so yeah, Cuba wore his own shirt to that on that scene.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I believe it.
there's a there's a line in this scene that I think transcends this movie that people, and it's not even a great line or anything, but people everywhere say it, and maybe haven't even seen this movie. Is when Ice Cube yells, "Domino,
Domino,
motherfuckers!"
motherfuckers! Yep. Yep. I said it too while the movie was playing.
Well, that and y'all want to bust some spades?
Yeah,
Yep.
y'all want to bust some spades?
Yep.
He is drinking St. Ides by the 40, and that is amazing.
So this scene alone is phenomenal for the characters that their actors that it introduces. Like,
Ice Cube is so fucking good in this movie, and it begins right here.
it does.
Yeah.
It begins
Like,
right here.
Because he is worldly, while still not being overly intelligent. He is worldly. Like he is talking about. It's like, of course I read books. I don't want to be an idiot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he does stupid things.
But he's like,
Yeah.
yes, you can get AIDS from somebody sucking your dick, dude. Like,
Yeah, he says stupid shit too. But
Yeah.
he wants to better himself, but doesn't know how.
Yeah, real quick, let's run down the actors and actresses that have gone on to just unbelievable careers. That, for the most part, this is the first time they're introduced on screen.
2 Oscars in this scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not only have you already met Angela Bassett and Lawrence Fishburne, who were well known enough, but they hadn't gone into the stratosphere yet.
They hadn't gotten their Oscar nomination.
That would happen. That would happen with What's Love Got to Do with It? They would reunite that. But you've got Ice Cube, his film debut. You've got
He's
more
instantly so charismatic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting stories around that in Singleton. Like Singleton hit backstage at the Arsenio Hall show, because Singleton, he worked like as a PA and security for the Arsenio Hall show. And there was some kerfuffle with Ice Cube supposed to be in backstage, and Singleton got him backstage, and they exchanged some words. They exchanged some phone numbers, right? And they just kind of kept in touch. And eventually, Singleton wrote this part for him. You've got Morris Chestnut, right?
Yeah.
You got Nia Long.
Yeah.
And then
Regina
you've got Regina King. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal that the star power in this scene alone, and many of these actors and actors had never been seen on screen before. It's pretty phenomenal.
I mean, like, shit, Morris Chestnut goes on to being kind of a sex symbol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least through the mid-'90s. So,
I mean, Regina King pretty much, like, she created the damn look with this in this scene, right? When her and Nia Long are interacting, it's like she doesn't say damn, but she's like thinking it. She's like,
no, it's her character is so funny.
I love her.
I mean, like, because, like, she is the perfect opposite to Ice Cube. She is everything Ice Cube is in girl form, and they butt heads constantly. It's amazing.
It's so great.
And she earns her place to go hang out, in Crenshaw with him later.
She's also the voice of the teenage black woman. Yeah. I mean, she really is. She's like, she questions a lot of, like, why are you always trying to, call people, women bitches and hoes? And she calls Ice Cube out on his bullshit, right? She calls out the black male machismo.
Hoes gotta eat too.
Yeah.
Hoes gotta eat too. Yeah. And and she also leads into one of the better lines that Ice Cube has too, where she's like, well, how do you know God isn't a sister? And, like, he just lays it down. It's like, well, look at all the bullshit. It's like, no woman would allow that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have nuclear bombs if God was a woman.
No bitch would allow that. I mean, it's just, it feels so real.
Yes.
Like, watching this movie, it's like you feel like you're at the party. That you're just on this side of the like.
Well, it's almost like you're Trey Styles a little bit.
A little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit. Like you're there too. And then of course Nia Long, which is Trey's girlfriend. He's trying to play game, and she's not having any of that bullshit.
Nope.
Like,
She just left the party.
she just left the party. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing
So
great.
much.
You're doing great.
Love it.
So then
good.
he has to go and kind of like kiss up to her, which like just completely and totally destroys his game.
Oh,
And then like of course they fight, but that's not. I mean, it's like she's calling him out on that. So it's like there's the perfect foil for each of our characters too, that also fit into their personality types that they're foiling, and it grounds a lot of these characters.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
But so basically, Doughboy's come home. It's he was probably in jail, is the assumption. And
I think he definitely was.
I
think they say it.
So basically he's just he's come home, and this is the only time that his mom really kind of shows him proper love. Really, it's like she throws this party.
Yeah.
And and it's like and this is where you basically get to know the rest of your characters for the rest of the movie. And because it's these characters that basically it's like Doughboy has his kind of crew. Not all of them are troublemakers or anything like that, but they're certainly they all fit together in some way.
Right.
They're not necessarily motivated, or they are living the life that they have been pressed into
Day by day, instead of with any kind of future aspirations really involved for them.
No desire to leave, desire to make it theirs.
Right.
Yeah. And and it's kind of funny because they're really not bad people. They just have bad ideas. Or at least they're not nearly as bad as the people in the red car that's driving around with a fucking double barrel shotgun ready to blast anybody who talks shit to them. They're not those guys, but they're not great because they don't seem to care that they're in this situation.
No, the way that they feel like they need to survive leads them down bad paths.
Exactly.
They're not outwardly looking for trouble, but trouble finds them because of the way they need to live their lives.
Well, yeah, they're Ice Cube. Doughboy's always fronting. He's always showing. He's got to show how hard he is, and then he criticizes those people who do the same thing, right?
Right.
And then he gets called out on that, and he laughs, and it's like it's a cycle. It's like, eventually that shit is going to come to a head, and it's going to be violence. In the scene at Crenshaw on the strip, right? That the whole confrontation scene. Singleton was saying, it's like, you could be having fun 1 minute, and next minute someone's getting shot. It's like it could happen at any time, at any moment. In those situations, you just never know.
And even to the plead of, can we just have one night where somebody doesn't get shot? That only gives them about a 2-minute respite.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it almost escalated things.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because who's this female to say this? I gotta react to that. Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, really, the thing is that this is a character-driven movie. There's not much of a plot. It's just the plot is survive at the end. It almost sounds like a horror movie, right? It's like the idea is that you have to live the movie. You have to survive it. And these characters at any moment could make the wrong decision and not survive the movie. And that's definitely what ends up happening.
Yeah.
Almost by accident and almost for doing the right thing. It's like the guy, one of the guys at the strip bumps into Ricky, and Ricky's like, "Hey man, what's going on?" Kind of living one of the tenets that Trey has.
Yeah.
with
his
dad.
dad.
Don't respect anybody who doesn't respect you.
Right.
And by living that tenet, now he's got somebody who days later still wants to fucking murder him.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it's like you see the red car driving around the neighborhood, checking things out, scoping stuff out. Ice Cube knows something's not right, but he doesn't put two and two together.
Yeah.
Until it's too late.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that happens as Ricky and Trey are walking to get the breading or whatever for the fish. I forget what.
Cornmeal.
Cornmeal, thank you. But Ricky is resigned to the fact that he's not going to make it to U.S.
Right, he doesn't think he gets the 700 needed on the SAT.
And he says he's going to go to the Army. And again, we have another reoccurrence of Trey bringing back up something his father taught him.
Yeah, the black
the Army
doesn't have any place for for white
Yeah,
people.
he sees the Army propaganda recruitment video during the football game.
What else does he do? He buys lottery tickets as a Hail Mary to try to get out.
Yep. And he said, one of these days I'm going to win it. Did we skip past, or do we need to talk about the gentrification scene? Or have we talked about enough of that?
Yeah, we're going to come. Let's. There's a couple of really, really important scenes that are really important here because, right, you have the gentrification scene where we've talked about how it basically lays down the thesis statement of this movie, which is we are playing into society's greater game. We're playing into its hands.
We have an older black gentleman who's blaming it on the youth.
Right.
And the youth is saying, well, we're
not doing anything.
What are we supposed to do?
Right.
Is almost
and then you
like
got the guy in the center who's saying, you guys both have it wrong.
Yeah.
You aren't even seeing the problem you're only blaming each other. You're not seeing the bigger game here.
And that's a very big idea for 22-year-old John Singleton to present here as the writer of this movie. Like his understanding of he's right. He's 1,000% right in what he's saying here. And for him to be that plugged in, it's kind of an amazing thing.
It goes back to what I was saying about how a 10-year-old could flip off a poster of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
They're plugged into ways that, when we were 22, we were still living in more or less the same place that we were living when we were 18 and 15 and in a certain way still living in the same general place that we were when we were 10, when we were benefiting from some stuff that other people were seeing the cracks in.
And
I was in a different world, but I was still protected.
Exactly.
I was being an idiot out in San Diego, but with zero cares in the world.
And again, it's the benefit of Singleton's father, who talked about those things with him and who had those conversations, and they're both, on an intelligent level to where, they can understand, these things, and his father was able to pass that along to him. And so he would have perspective of his own childhood, his own reality.
Think about it like this. If this was a mostly white production, like behind the scenes, how much you want to bet that Singleton would have written this character, was ready to, gets Lawrence Fishburne, gets everything ready to go, and the costume designer says, okay, here's what Furious is going to wear. It's like a fucking dashiki or something.
Right.
How much you want to bet that would have been, they would have dressed him like he was a radical.
Mm-hmm. Or he would have needed to have like a problem with drugs or some other issue in his character. Yeah. Instead of being the powerful figure that he was.
Well, Morris Chestnut, Ricky almost makes a joke about that. Was your father a preacher or something? Yeah.
Yeah. Right, but like they would have given him crazy hair. They would have given him some sort of an African garb or something. And it's like, yes, this was also during the time where most of the black kids that I went to school with were wearing African colors. Like the black, orange, red, and green shirts and stuff like that, right? And yet, I'm willing to bet their dads and their parents probably were like, well, that's great that but the issue is this over here, and they're probably just wearing whatever Lawrence Fishburne was wearing, right? It's like it's that perception, it's what society would have put onto that character, as opposed to what somebody who actually knows what that character truly is, if that makes sense. He's not a radical at all. He has radical ideas, or what ideas that some white people would consider radical by blaming the system. He's logical.
Yes.
He's got logical radicalism.
Yeah, well, what he's advocating is that, our people should be doing the same as the Italians did and the Greeks did, and creating neighborhoods of unity that they control, and that they had their own economy, and that they control their own real estate and their own lending and all of that. Yep. It's like that is what we need.
But the thing is, I feel like we push that at arm's length, because it's like, well, they would have just not let us in. That's not. I mean, have you ever been to Chinatown? Have you ever been to to those district places? Like, they want white people money too.
Yeah,
it spends just as good as Chinese or Jewish or black people money.
The point then is that it's like, we want these things too.
Yes.
But we're killing ourselves. But society is enabling that. Like, yep. They don't want us to have that. So we're confronted with obstacles at every end of the street. There's the liquor stores and the lottery, and all of these things are built.
Gun shops.
Yeah, gun shops. All of these things are there to prevent the exact thing we need to overcome.
Enable us to kill each other and prevent us from becoming better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too when
I love it when he talks about the drugs too. It's like, well, why we didn't bring those drugs in? Where'd those drugs come from?
Right.
Yeah, black people aren't growing drugs magically.
Yeah.
It's just, but it becomes a problem when it shows up in Iowa, is what he says.
Yeah. Yep.
Because then it's like, well, who do we know that does these drugs?
We can't blame it on anyone anymore. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But the Trey and Ricky go back to the house, and they're smart enough to realize that the one person that should have heard Furious Styles' speech is Doughboy.
Yep.
He wasn't there. They're like, you should have been there.
Right.
If he had heard that speech and acted on this stuff in his life at all, none of this probably would have happened.
Right. But instead, they decide they're going to go down to Crenshaw and to the Strip, and things escalate. That night is when, Ricky and Trey get pulled over, and the cops make their return. And the cop holds the gun to Trey's head. And this is when Trey finally breaks. And this scene was, to me, kind of heartbreaking when he goes over to his girlfriend's house. And he's just angry. And he's just letting it all out. It's all
he's acting up. He's acting like he did when he was 10.
Yeah.
The reason he was sent to his father, and his father ultimately helped him out of that kind of reaction.
Right. But at the same time, he's still seeing so much, and he has no place to put it.
Right.
He has no place to put it, and it's bottled up, and it finally explodes, and he's just screaming, and he's not even saying anything. You can pick out things that he's saying, but none of it is connected. He
just wants to punch everything is basically what his reaction is.
Yeah, and it's like he so desperately now wants to leave and get out and make something of himself and be some. And it's in a lesser person, or a person who didn't have the guiding hand that he would have had. If this was Doughboy, he would have gone out and found somebody to kill. He would have killed the cop.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So you have that scene where it's like you have, it's just finally Trey is just he's had enough, you know, and he doesn't know where to put it.
Jason, just so you know, this is after the cop puts the gun and he goes back to his girlfriend, and he's having the punching the sky reaction.
Yeah, it's powerful. Again, the helicopters and the spotlights are all pervient.
Right. And the way I put it was that if this was Doughboy having this reaction, he would have killed the cop.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
this is from the commentary on this scene from Singleton. They're frustrated. Their environment is encroaching on them. It's oppressive. You just want to strike out. Yeah. How more fitting for our times is that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an exact perfect example of what's happening.
You just want to strike out, but you know that the easiest way to strike out just makes things worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so how do you deal with that? You know, what do you do to make it work? And so I mean, and then that's it's shortly thereafter when things really come to a head. The red car is scoping place out, wanting to find Ricky, and finally finds Ricky on the streets. And they're there to basically get back at Ricky for basically standing up to them and making a fool of them, even though it was Ice Cube that was like, hey, you know, we can really escalate this if you want, but probably being more scared to strike against Ice Cube, not knowing if his buddies would come after them. That's my take, at least. But so they decide to split up because they think, well, you know, it's easier to split up or whatever, since people in different directions or whatever. But Ricky is paying a little bit too much attention to his lottery cards.
It's interesting to me how naive Ricky is.
Ricky is totally naive. He doesn't even handle being a father the way you would think he would. And not that he's a bad father. You just think that he would see that as a warning to him.
Yeah. He's a little aloof. Yeah.
Well, he just thinks that his talent will win over above everything else. Well, talent does win over above anything else in the white world.
Yeah, you can't outrun a gun.
Right.
It's basically like painted pretty clearly in this scene.
Right. And it's so, you know, he gets caught and he gets shot in the back. And he dies.
This is the scene I remember most from when I was a kid. It's Ricky running down the alley.
Yep. And
just you're rooting so hard for him to get away.
But you also know that he is not faster than a.
But if this was a movie that I had been accustomed to seeing at that time, Ricky would have escaped.
Yeah.
That's not the world that these people live in.
Right. Exactly.
These characters live in is what I'm trying to say. I'm not. But yeah, it's so brutally honest and devastating. Like I don't even know. I don't even know.
The one guy who, no matter how smart Trey is or how tough Doughboy is, he is the one guy who absolutely could escape all of this. Because obviously Smarts didn't get Furious out of that neighborhood, you know. So obviously, you know, if he just stays alive, his talent would get him out of that area or get him out of those trouble. But his
ticket wasn't golden. He didn't have the golden ticket.
My take on Furious, though, is that he probably could get out, but he doesn't want to. He wants he wants to help the neighborhood.
I tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah, fair enough. And he could also be saying, I'm making a stand and not leaving.
Exactly. This is his home.
Enough. Yeah, fair enough. That actually, that makes sense because he's defending his home at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point. He would, if it was up to him, he'd be the last person to be gentrified out of that. Of that area.
Yeah, he's living his speech that he gave.
Right.
Yeah. He's living it.
I mean, his whole job is helping black folk, get loans to buy homes,
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So, so they bring Ricky home. The mom blames Doughboy. He didn't do anything. While he didn't necessarily help anything, he didn't do anything. She had just hit him earlier for having a scuffle with Ricky.
That's part of the tragedy of this whole thing is the last moment that Ricky and Doughboy had together was a fight.
Right. And Doughboy was willing to go to war for Ricky, too. I mean, like, when he realizes what's going on, it's like, I got to get the gun and everybody get in the car. We got to go.
Well, it's actually Trey's plan. He's like, meet me at my house in 5 minutes.
Well, no, I'm talking about, like, when he realizes that the red car's
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And then after they bring him home, Trey's like, hey, my dad's got a gun. I know where he keeps it. Meet me in my place in 5 minutes and we'll go hunt these sons of bitches down. And Furious is like, oh, if you're so hard, why don't you just shoot me? And tries to block him from leaving to go with Doughboy to find these guys. And you really see what Doughboy is capable of when he kills the ringleader of that trio. He just kills him. He just fucking kills him. He wants to know.
Well, he's
why.
in blind fucking rage at this point.
Right, but he does not have. I mean, again, he's kind of the super ego, or he's the id, where he's not gonna. He has no way of stopping himself from. And you see what he is capable of when he gets into that mode.
Right.
And I mean, they is it Dookie that kills the other two? Is Dookie the one that has the AK?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Ice Cube basically finishes them off with his
Dookie
gun.
knocks them all down, and then I think killed one, and then Doughboy kills the other two, I believe.
There's something I really appreciate in this scene that I'm sure was intentional. That Doughboy doesn't give Trey any shit for getting out of the car.
Yeah.
He's like, Trey's like, pull over, I want to get out. And you could see that going in a totally different direction, where Doughboy's like, confronts him on, you don't want to get revenge for Ricky or whatever, and he doesn't do any of that. He just silently pulls over. Yeah. You wonder how many times someone wanted to get out of the car but were afraid to because they're afraid of the reaction of their friends.
Yes, it was the machismo thing again.
Mm-hmm.
But Doughboy realizes his part in the group. This is his part.
This is his part, right? And because like Doughboy loves Trey, because like when they first show up, it's like here's two people who couldn't be more different. And like Doughboy is like legit excited to see Trey when he shows up at the cookout.
Yeah.
And it's like they could not be any different. And so he understands that's not his role.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and in a way Doughboy sees the future of I ain't leaving this neighborhood, but you can.
No, I'm going to end up in a parking lot like this, but you don't have to.
Right. And he even says that in the next morning.
Pretty much.
He's like, I understood why you got out. I didn't, I don't want you. I didn't want you there. Is basically the gist of it. But yeah, it's like that next morning is pretty sobering because at that point, like Ice Cube's talking about, it's like, I turned on the TV this morning and, I saw all of this talk about these war zones and these, all these foreign places where all the foreigners live being so terrible. And
they're not talking about us.
Right. And nothing about my brother, nothing about Ricky. And that's when he says, they either don't know, don't show, or don't care about what's going on in the hood.
Yeah.
And that, when I saw that as a kid, it's like,
Yep.
That sounds about right.
He came to the realization organically.
Yeah.
But it was too late for him.
Right.
Which is really sad.
Yeah. And, they say the next day he saw his brother get buried, and 2 weeks later he died.
He was murdered.
He was murdered.
Yep.
Yeah. So
but there was that powerful line, too, where Trey told Doughboy, you still have one brother left.
Yeah.
Right.
That touched me a lot. Like,
right. Right, because they still, they're as different as can be. They have different upbringings, they have different backgrounds, but they're still in this together, and they need each other.
That's what makes them brothers, is that they can be greatly different, but still love one another and still fight for one another.
And still need one another.
You don't find that in friendship a lot. If you find someone who's not like you, you don't normally become friends with them.
No.
You know what I mean? I'm being overgeneral, but
no, you're right. But these people have shared experience too.
Yeah.
They grew up here. They grew up, with that. So, and you do find out that Trey and his girlfriend do leave for Atlanta. They go to college, and they do get a happy ending. At least we think they do. They get to go someplace that, at that point in time, Atlanta was kind of like the capital of, black culture. Still kind of is, to a certain extent. So, they get to go someplace where they don't feel like outsiders, and they feel like they can be heard. They feel like they can be, they can make a difference.
Right.
And, you hope the Furious is still fine, but.
I wondered about that, why we didn't get any kind of update on his parents at the end. I guess it didn't really matter, but I don't know what happened to them.
Yeah. I mean, we assumed that Furious ultimately becomes the old man in that scene with more wisdom than the old man.
Well, like Trey had alluded to earlier, you'll be talking to your grandkids and telling stories like blah or whatever he says.
Right.
And Furious is like, oh, I'm too young for grandkids or whatever. Right. But you imagine that's where he ends up, being that guy.
Yep.
Oh, we didn't talk about the great cafe scene between him and Angela Bassett.
Oh yeah.
Where she just dresses him down completely. It's like, I give you credit, but it's not like you should get any awards for being a good father.
For doing what you're supposed to do.
what you're supposed to do. It's like, oh, it's so good. It's like fucking real talk, man.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing also that's underplayed so much in this. You always heard about, growing up, you always hear, and Jason, you said this too when you were talking about your experience, but I mean, there are a ton of black kids who have no father for various reasons. Maybe they're in jail. Maybe they ran off. Maybe they, disregard being a father.
Maybe they got shot.
Maybe they got shot, but it's, I mean, there are songs written about not having a father figure, or that being, that increasing that need to prove that you're hard or whatever. And so, I mean, that's something that, Lawrence Fishburne's like, yeah, I could have been like my buddy who, wanted to go around and steal things and, fuck up shit, whatever. But it's like, I had to be a dad. I wanted to be a dad. And, and he's still a single father. I mean, like, they're still separated, but, he had a relationship with his son. It was an every weekend thing that became an everyday thing.
Yep.
And, by him stepping up to be a dad allowed his mother to become, she was a lawyer? Is that what she was?
I'm not sure. She was getting her master's degree. I know that.
She had a pretty nice apartment during that call.
She did.
Oh yeah,
she had really nice LA apartment.
Yeah, she had that like early '90s swag going on there. Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, with like your walls are windows.
Yeah,
that sort of apartment.
That black leather couch. Yeah.
Yep.
A funny note here before, because I know this episode will probably end with some seriousness. When she calls Trey and he's talking to his girlfriend about getting some skin, and
this is your mother.
And she's like, in what kind of way is answering a phone who dis? Right? Who dis? And then he hands the phone to Furious, and he's like, who dis? I was like, I have a note real big, like father, like son. It just
good.
That was one of those moments of that kind of brought me some humor.
Oh yeah.
During the film, it took the tone to a nice place for a minute.
There is a lot of those nice place moments and a lot of humor with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
Like you legitimately believe that Lawrence Fishburne is Cuba Gooding Jr.'s dad.
Oh man,
Agreed.
there's the scene where he brings him the barbecue,
Uh-huh.
and he's starting to eat the barbecue, and he's like, yeah, she still makes a barbecue, and then Cuba Gooding Jr. is like, can you fix my fade? And he starts describing how he wants his fade, and his father's like, I'm eating. He's
Yeah.
like, after you finish, and his father is like, yeah, I can do that. It's just this really sweet like exchange that feels perfectly natural.
Well, and
right?
he's still teaching a lesson there.
Yeah.
Hey, respect me here. I'm trying to eat.
But I also think that that Cuba Gooding Jr. was kind of like, yeah, duh, Dad. Like after you eat,
Yeah,
you know.
Right. There are little moments like that where it's like, yeah, I have to imagine that they spent a lot of time off camera just building that ability, that repertoire, you know.
Right.
And I'm sure Cuba Gooding Jr. learned a shit ton from Lawrence Fishburne.
I wouldn't be surprised, not knowing anything, if he wasn't a father figure to all those young men on that set.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
was. That cut straight out of the commentary. In fact, not only that, but also to John Singleton. John Singleton met him.
Cowboy Curtis.
Yeah, behind the scenes on the Pee Wee Herman show. Yeah, and told him, he's like, I'm going to write you a role in a movie. And Lawrence Fishburne was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then sure enough, you know.
Sure thing, partner.
Mm-hmm.
And then
and Cherry was like, sorry.
But what I find fascinating is that John Singleton was constantly asking Lawrence Fishburne about, like, what would Francis Ford Coppola do? You know, how would Francis Ford Coppola talk to his actors? Like, constantly, like, picking his brain about his experience on Apocalypse Now. It's like always learning. Like, John Singleton used every person to his utmost advantage to
He didn't want to ask him how the guy who made the Death Wish 2 worked with him.
No, I think he was focused more on Francis Ford Coppola.
Well, if we know anything from the Canon Films documentary, it wouldn't have ended well with the advice that he might have picked up from that guy. But
it's
anyway,
funny because Fishburne was only like 7 years older than Singleton too. You know, like Fishburne.
But that's like 28 years in dog years. You know,
dog years.
Yeah.
In Fishburne years.
Larry Fishburne years.
Yeah, like because
18,
Cuba Gooding Jr. and John Singleton and Ice Cube, all those guys are all about the same age. They're all like early 20s. Yeah.
Because I mean, like Fishburne was only like, it was like for real, like he was just out of high school in Apocalypse Now. It's like, you can just tell this guy's right out of high school. Yeah. So, but at one point, Ice Cube called Morris Chestnut Tecmo Bowl playing motherfucker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way I can finish this episode without saying that.
And what about when Chris or whatever offers Trey a binky? What the fuck was that?
So that's a weird thing. Chris, apparently the binky wasn't like a cultural thing because I remember kids in junior high with the binkies. And I wonder if maybe it started with Chris. All Chris was doing was trying to appease his oral fixation because he was trying to quit smoking, like in real life.
That's
Isn't that funny?
That's
so they just wrote it into the script.
That's amazing.
One other thing, one of the
They're
guys,
like, that looks interesting. Let's keep that. Yeah.
one of the guys in the locker room after we see Ricky like going through his regular practice, and he's like in the locker room and everything. A guy a couple of lockers over had cutouts from the cover of the Sports Illustrated that had Doug Williams on it, and it said "Wow" when the Skins beat the Broncos, and also had a cutout of Ricky Sanders. I was like, "Hail to the Redskins! Fuck yeah!" That guy gets it.
Oh, I love this. So the black cop, right, that we talked about earlier, Singleton met him when Singleton was an extra on Sam Raimi's Darkman.
Oh wow!
because that guy is in Darkman, and the reason why Singleton was an extra in Darkman was just so that he could get food. He was a starving college kid, and he was like, I know if I can get on as an extra that I'll get access to the craft services.
Nice.
Yeah, and get like paid as an extra. So he got a little bit of money and also got fed.
That's awesome.
Do you think at any point in time he might have considered Brock Peters for that cup?
Oh man, poor Brock Peters. Poor Brock Peters.
Call back. Call back to Star Trek 6.
Call back
Everybody
as
go
a
listen to that.
motherfucker.
All right,
man.
so
He wasn't sweating enough in that scene.
he wasn't. Yeah, no,
Man,
he really wasn't.
nobody sweats like Brock Peters and nobody.
Yeah, because I can't imagine that place where they were doing those Accords were not well, air conditioned, but whatever. All right. All right, so rounding things out, and
Yes.
I don't know. Do you guys have anything left to say about anything? Like anything?
I have a short thing as a.
You have a short thing as a motherfucker?
As a motherfucker, no. Echoing Ice Cube's line of "Don't know, don't show, don't care."
Yeah.
We as everybody, I won't even single out just white people. We all need to know, show, and care.
Yep.
Now, especially.
100%.
Yep.
100%. We have the opportunity to tear this all down and build something better in its place.
Yep.
I mean, as we speak, this has become a worldwide movement. The UK are tearing down slaver statues. Like, how fucking amazing is that?
Yeah. And truthfully, I know we have varying degrees of who we vote for, and how we view things from the left here. But don't sit out in November.
Nope.
Don't sit out, because one guy may not be the guy you really want, but he's listening right now, and you have the opportunity to ask that person to do things. If you really want to make a change, November is your opportunity.
Yeah, it's pretty damn clear who's listening right now and who isn't.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so next week we're going to tick a box for old Jason here. We're going to finally get to some David Lynch.
Oh shit! Yeah, we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Blue Velvet. What do you want to say about Blue Velvet real quick? What can you say in 30 seconds about Blue Velvet?
Blue Velvet is not my favorite David Lynch film, but I think it is the most representative David Lynch film of his career. And there's a lot of the trademarks and hallmarks of his aesthetic style that is presented in this film that I'm very excited.
Okay.
It is his not his first, but his iconic neighborhood film, and that not everything is as it seems on the veneer surface. There are things happening underneath that you don't see in your day-to-day. It's almost kind of a weird, interesting contrast to Boyz in the Hood in some ways.
Because everybody in Blue Velvet's white.
Everyone in Blue Velvet is white, but not everything. Not everything is so great in White Town.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the movie we got after that is also going to help drive some societal ideology too. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. But I also know for a fact that your favorite David Lynch movie is in fact Dune.
It is not, but
no, that's not what you told me.
But thanks for trying to change the narrative on that.
Anyway, Blue Velvet next week. So when and where and how can people hear this episode?
Go to filmseizure.com. You can see all of our episodes, all of our writings, everything there. It's home base. If you would like to listen to us on your favorite podcast site of choice. We are lots of different places. We are on Spotify. We are on SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
And the YouTubes.
And we are also on YouTubes. Yep. If you like YouTube and you're on YouTube, we have a channel there. Everything goes there. Yeah, and you can also follow us on the social medias. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Jeff, what do you got going on Mondays? What happens on Mondays?
Mondays are Monster Mondays.
Yeah. What's
this upcoming Monday is Creepazoids.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, I go from having like Think from Another World and Village of the Damned, and it's like, nah, we need some David Dakota in there now. They go from the higher, to the lower.
One would say that's like top tier David Dakota, though.
It's pretty good. I like it.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. It's not great, but it's fun.
I mean, he's made real stinkers.
He's made some real stinkers, but he's made some really good movies too. Some really good fun B movies. Creepazoids does a hell of a lot with one location and 4 people.
Yeah, that's kind of his MO. That was probably like the 3rd movie he made that day. Yeah,
probably.
Speaking of stinkers, though, what about Friday, Jeff? What happens Friday?
Hey, B-Movie Enema. Get your cleanings. Come on out. B-Movie Enema on Fridays. This upcoming Friday. What do I got this upcoming Friday? Let's talk about that real quick. Mutant War, the sequel to Battle for the Lost Planet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. I love those 2 movies. Those are a lot of fun. So, yeah, bmovieenema.com. Perfect thing for you to do while taking your morning dump on Friday mornings. Saturdays, I also have 00 Saturdays right here on Film Seizure, where I write some essays about Bond movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So, so do all of those things. Do all of them.
Do them. Cool.
Until next week, when we get into some... Is there some torch singing going on in Blue Velvet? Is that what that is? Is that what Isabella Rossellini's doing? Is she a torch singer?
What is a torch singer?
Torch singer, torch. like at a lounge.
Yes, I've never heard it. I've never heard that term, torch singer.
Me neither. I think Jeff just made it up.
But yes, she is a lounge singer. Yes.
Okay. All right. So until then, until we do that with crazy ass Dennis Hopper, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver. Black Lives Matter. You have been listening to Film Seizure.